Before they spotted me, I managed to snap 7 photos. Suddenly, David leaped off the bed and shouted, "Give me that camera!" In response, I reached behind me, pulled out the tool tucked in my pants. He paused, sneered, and challenged, "You don't have the guts." Next second, he collapsed to the floor, screaming. "My God!" my father exclaimed. "You did that to your own brother?" I replied coldly. "The only reason you're staying here is that I'd rather let Mom have the joy of taking care of you herself." Sonia, my wife of 9 years, was crying, "Don't end me, please, I'm begging." I ignored her and told my father, "I don't know what makes me angrier, you cheating with my wife, or you doing things with her that she would never let me do. Anyway, I'm resigning. You'll need to change the sign on the building from Dawson and Sons to Dawson and Son. Actually, maybe just Dawson's if that a-hole passes away. I don't see anyone rushing to call emergency to help him." As I turned to leave, he asked where I was headed. "I'm going to your place to show Mom the pictures. Hold on, we need to talk." "You might need to talk, but I don't want to hear it." As I headed out the door, he shouted, "Bobby, don't walk away! Talk to me!" I ignored him. As I walked to my car, I punctured the front and rear tires on the right side of his car. I didn't want him speeding off to get to Mom before me. I drove 2 blocks, then pulled over and called my mom. I'd have preferred to give her the pictures in person, but with emergency being called for David, the police would likely come to my parents' house. When she picked up, I told her I was sending her some photos she needed to see before Dad came home. She had questions, but I said I'd call her back later. I glanced at my watch and realized I had about an hour before the bank closed. As I drove there, I thought about what had just happened. I'd come back a day early from a business trip and saw my dad's car in my driveway. I didn't think much of it at first, since I'd always asked him to check in on Sonia when I was away to make sure she was okay and if she needed anything. Of course, when I said she might need something, I didn't mean anything like this. Anyway, as soon as I walked in the front door, the noise coming from the bedroom made it clear what was going on. I went to the den, grabbed the lockbox from the bottom drawer of my desk, unlocked it, took out the Colt, and tucked it into my belt just in case. I pulled out my phone, turned on the camera, and headed to the bedroom. There was Sonia on her knees with David, while my father was standing from behind. That was when I realized why I was always the one sent out of town while David stayed home. After I got to the bank, I emptied all our accounts and cashed out the 6 certificates of deposit from the safe deposit box. By the time I left, I had just over $18,000. I then drove to the bank where the company's accounts were held and withdrew $15,000. I considered it severance pay, though some might call it embezzlement. But honestly, I wasn't worried about embezzlement when I was probably already wanted for assault with a tool. Before leaving town, my last call was to David's wife, Cindy. I reached her just as she was about to head to the hospital to visit David. As soon as she recognized my voice, she said, "Bob, what's going on? Your dad just called and said what you've done to Dave." I explained, "I got back from a business trip and caught him in bed with Sonia. I took some photos, and when he tried to grab the camera from me, I got him in the leg. I'm sending the photos to your email. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I thought you should know. Take care, Cindy. Bye." After hanging up, I drove past the city limit sign and headed west. About 5 miles out, I pulled over and parked. To avoid tracking, I removed the battery from my phone. I thought about throwing the phone away, but decided to keep it to preserve the photos. I planned to get a disposable phone later. I then continued driving, trying to put as much distance between me and Michigan as possible. After 2 days of driving, I reached Colorado. I checked into a motel just outside Denver and decided to call home using the track phone I had picked up at a Walmart in Kansas. Since it was 4 in the afternoon, my dad, assuming he was still alive, would be at work. My mom answered after 3 rings. "Hello?" "Hey, Mom." "Bob, where are you?" Since the police were probably searching for me, I thought it best to be a bit evasive. So I said, "On my way to New York." "Why on earth are you heading to New York?" "I'm just trying to put as much distance as possible between myself, Sonia, David, and Dad." "Did you really have to do that, David? He's never going to walk properly again. He's lucky I didn't end him. I thought Cindy deserved that satisfaction." "She didn't end him, but she did throw him out of their house. Sending those pictures was harsh." "It wasn't harsh. I thought she should know what kind of man she was married to. I sent them to you for the same reason." "That was a waste of time for you. I already knew he was a jerk. I knew he cheated sometimes, but I put up with it to keep the family together. But Sonia? I couldn't ignore that. I kicked him out and met with a lawyer the next day to start the divorce process. You need to come back. I'm going to end up with the business, and I'll need your help to run it. Why do you think that? The business was set up with money I inherited from my father. My lawyer says I'll get 60 to 65%, which will give me control. I'm going to need your help. Are you planning to keep the business as Dawson and Sons or change it to Dawson and Son with me as the son? Don't be like that, Bob. Dave is my son, just like you are. If he's around, I won't be. I can't be near him without wanting to hurt him. You should call Sonia. She needs to talk to you. I don't want to talk to her, so I'll skip it. You might as well get used to the idea. Divorce usually comes with counseling, and you'll have to talk to her then. What divorce? I just left her. I'm not spending money on a lawyer. Eventually, she'll want to be single again, so she can handle the divorce and pay for it herself. Bob, do you really need to insult her like that? Why not? That's what she is. What do you call a married woman who's having closeness with two men on the bed her husband bought? 403 is actually pretty tame. I just called to let you know I'm all right, and I'll try to check in once a week. Talk to you later. Love you. Bye. I didn't hear anything about the $15,000 I withdrew from the company account, so I figured they hadn't noticed it yet. I spent a week in Denver getting to know the area. It was nice, and I did feel a bit drawn to the mountains, but I decided it was too early to settle down. I needed to keep moving to make it harder for them to find me. I stopped in Castle Rock and had lunch at a place called Tricocci's. While I was there, I tried calling Mom to let her know I was okay, but there was no answer. On a whim, I decided to call the business. Good morning. Thanks for calling Dawson and Sons. How can I help you? Morning, Glenda. Is my mom around? Bobby, where are you? Things are falling apart here. You need to come back. Not going to happen. Is Mom there? I'll transfer you. Bob? Morning, Mom. How's New York? New York's behind me. I didn't like it much. I'm in Georgia now, in a town called Dawson. I'm having breakfast at a cozy place called Town and Country. I'm seriously thinking of settling here. You need to come back home. I don't think so. I need time to get over what happened. If I came back now, I might end up hurting Dad and Dave if I had to be around them. I need some time before I even think about coming back. Could you at least call Sonia and talk to her? I'm really worried about her. She's a mess right now. She made this mess herself. She can deal with it on her own. I'm serious, Bob. I'm afraid she might do something to hurt herself. Like what? Self-ending? I wouldn't rule it out. From my perspective, it might be quicker and cheaper than a divorce. That's really harsh. Harsh? Try coming home from a business trip and finding your wife in bed with two men, doing things with them that she'd never do with you. She's lucky I didn't end her after I did what I did to David. She's dead to me, and I'd appreciate it if you never bring her up again. I didn't raise... Mom, have you forgotten who those two men were? I'll call you later. I hung up and nearly threw my phone against the wall. I couldn't believe she was still pushing me to deal with Sonia, given everything that had happened. I drove out of Castle Rock and headed south on I-25. I didn't have a clear destination in mind, but I figured just driving was fine for now. Around 2 p.m., I pulled into a truck stop to get some gas and grab a bite to eat. After filling up, I parked toward the back of the lot. Just as I was about to get out of the car, I heard a tap-tap on my window. I looked over and saw a young woman standing there. I rolled down the window and asked, "What's up?" She glanced around nervously and wouldn't meet my eyes. It seemed like she was struggling to find the courage to speak. As I looked her over, I noticed she was quite attractive, probably in her early 20s. Finally, she found her words and said, "This is really hard for me, but I'm starving. I haven't eaten in 2 days and I'm in pain. I'll give you a BJ for $20 so I can get some food." It was clear she wasn't a professional since she only asked for $20. I started to roll up the window, seeing the disappointment on her face. But then I got out of the car and invited her inside for something to eat. Her name was Maggie Toman. We didn't talk much until we were seated in a booth. I asked her why she was trying to get a meal. Before she could answer, the waitress came over and Maggie ordered a burger and fries. I suggested we both get the 8-ounce sirloin dinner instead, knowing it would be more filling. Maggie reluctantly shared her story. She was escaping from an abusive stepfather and an alcoholic mother. Her stepfather had threatened her, and her mother was too drunk or high to care. One night, she took all the cash from their wallets and ran away. She planned to go to Houston where her sister lived, but fell asleep on the bus to Denver. When she woke up, her purse was gone, leaving her stranded. She explained that her stepfather didn't act on his threats to avoid being arrested for having that with a minor. Maggie had just turned 18 the day she left. She had threatened to call the police, but her stepfather laughed, saying it would be a he said she said situation. and her mother would side with him to keep getting pills. She didn't want to risk it. Our food arrived and we ate quietly. Maggie skipped dessert, ready to get back to hitchhiking. I decided to help her, as I was aimlessly driving to escape my own problems. After paying, we got in the car. She nervously admitted she'd never done this before. I reassured her I wouldn't take advantage and offered her a ride to Houston. We drove until 8, then stopped for gas and food. While waiting, I asked if her sister knew she was coming. Maggie's phone was stolen with her purse, so she hadn't contacted her. I gave her my phone to call her sister and gave her privacy. When I returned, our food had arrived. Maggie said her sister was eager to see her and mentioned their mom had called, sounding sober, asking about Maggie. I suggested she call her mom, but Maggie said she wasn't ready yet, maybe in a few days. Once we were back on the road, Maggie asked, "You've heard my story. What about yours?" I filled her in. "Your dad and your brother? And you didn't do anything to them? What did your wife say about it?" I didn't ask her, I just left. Maybe she was being forced or blackmailed. She wasn't forced. I could tell from her reactions while I was taking the pictures. If she was being blackmailed, she could have told me and we could have figured something out. I still think you should find out why. Maybe someday, but I'm not ready for that right now. We stopped at a Days Inn, and I booked a room with 2 beds, but Maggie didn't want to stay alone. After her shower, she climbed into bed with me. She touched me, and her hand began to move down my body. I grabbed her wrist and said, "No, but I want to. I owe you." "No, you don't owe me anything. I'm not going to take advantage of you. You were in a tough spot and desperate when you made that offer. I was just glad to help. I'm not doing this to pay you back. I want to do it because I want to. Is that okay?" I'm no saint, and Maggie was definitely attractive. Since I no longer felt tied to Sonia, I let go of Maggie's wrist. She saw that as a yes, and we both enjoyed it. We got a quick bite to eat and continued our drive. Since we would reach Houston after midnight, I decided to stop for the night around 9 instead of arriving at her sister's place at 2 in the morning. When I didn't get out of the car, she asked if I was coming in. I liked her, but didn't see a future for us. I said, "I'd like to, but I can't. I'm behind schedule and need to keep moving." She looked disappointed, but kissed me goodbye, thanked me before getting out. I watched her go inside. I checked into a motel and had a meal at IHOP, thinking about what to do next. I decided to visit the Alamo in San Antonio, which was about 3 hours from Houston. Half an hour outside Columbus, I saw a car pulled over with a man and woman hitchhiking. I stopped to help. The man, Ray, got in the front seat, and the woman, Sarah, in the back. After a short distance, Ray pulled a switchblade on me, demanding my cash and car. I reached for the .45 in the door pocket and said, "I don't think so." Before I could use it, Sarah choked Ray with her purse straps. He dropped the knife and struggled, but it was too tight. I put the Colt back, turned onto a dirt road, and pulled over. I took the knife, got out, and opened the passenger door. I told Sarah to let him go, and she retrieved her purse. Ray, now unconscious, slumped forward. I dragged him out and left him on the ground. I checked Ray's pulse and saw that he was still alive. I undressed him, rolled him into the ditch beside the road, and tossed his clothes into the car's trunk. I then asked Sarah if she wanted to sit in the front seat. "You're not going to leave me here?" she asked. "Why would I do that?" "I'm not sure. Maybe because I was with him? Even if you were, you helped me, so why would I abandon you?" She shrugged and moved up front with me. I made a U-turn, turned left at the corner, and we headed toward San Antonio. Once we were driving, I asked, "So, you weren't involved with him?" "I'd only known him for about an hour. My car broke down and he stopped to offer me a ride. He turned out to be a real jerk and thought I should pay him back with closeness. I was planning to go along with him until he stopped for food or gas, and then I'd leave him. When he started threatening me, I knew I had to act, which is why I used the purse straps." "An hour ago, why didn't he drop you off in Waverly so you could arrange a tow and repair for your car?" "It wasn't my car and I didn't care what happened to it." I raised an eyebrow at that, and she explained, "It's my husband's company car. I'm sure he's either reported it stolen or will soon. My plan was to leave it at the San Antonio airport and fly to San Diego." Seeing my reaction, she added, "I should probably tell you the whole story. I caught my husband cheating on me. To get back at him, I slept with his brother and told him about it. I said we were even, and he could either stop cheating or I'd continue hooking up with guys every time he did. He called me a 403 and said it was fine for men to cheat, but not for married women." "Did he actually say that?" "He said men are programmed to reproduce, and women are programmed to stay home and care for the family. He used the term nature. Then he said he was leaving me because he wouldn't live with a 403. That night, After he fell asleep, I took the car keys and left. I spent the night in a motel, went to the bank when it opened, and emptied the accounts. After that, I drove until the car broke down, and here I am. I laughed out loud. What's so funny? I'm just laughing at the coincidence. It's almost like we're in the same situation. How do you figure? I told her my story of how I ended up on the road and picked her up. Oh my gosh, what are the chances? I guess you won't be reconciling with her. Not a chance. She mentioned her family in San Diego and her plans to stay with them until she got back on her feet. When I asked if she was in a hurry to get there, she said just getting there mattered. I shared my plan to visit the Alamo in San Antonio and suggested we drive to San Diego together since I'd never been there. She agreed, appreciating the savings on flights. In San Antonio, we visited the Alamo and the River Walk, then bought a road atlas to plan our route to San Diego. The drive would take about 2.5 days. We decided to leave the next morning and looked for a motel for the night. I asked if she preferred separate rooms or one with twin beds. She playfully suggested one room with one bed, wanting to get even with her soon-to-be ex. I agreed with a smile. It took us 6 days to drive the 1,500 miles to San Diego. We arrived at 6 p.m. on a Saturday, and I asked for her address. Not tonight, she said. I want to spend one more night with you before you leave. I'll call my mom and tell her we'll arrive tomorrow. She looked at me and asked, Have you ever had a woman from behind? I have. I've never tried it. My husband Bert always wanted to, but I thought it was too gross. I want to try it now. Why now? What made you change your mind? I want to give you something I never gave Bert, and I'm sure I'll tell him someday how much I enjoyed it. Have you thought about the possibility that you might not like it? Maybe I won't, but that's not what I'll tell him. It turned out she did enjoy it and wanted to do it repeatedly. It was 6 o'clock when we arrived at her mother's house. She looked at me with a sad expression and said, I'd like to invite you in, but it would be too awkward right now. When I called Mom, she told me Bert is here. Apparently, he's trying to convince me to take him back. Are you going to? I'm not sure. I do love him. I've loved him since 7th grade. I left because he said he couldn't live with a 403 and that he was divorcing me. If you want me to stay in the car, I can. Honestly, it's tempting, but what happened to me is still too fresh for me to make that kind of decision. She gave me a piece of paper with her number on it. In case you want to call me. She kissed me passionately, then got out of the car. I was really tempted to call her back, but I decided against it and drove away. I checked into a motel and went next door to a village inn for a meal. After eating, I returned to the motel room and decided to call Mom to let her know I was okay. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. Hello? It was my father's voice, so I hung up. I was confused and wondered what was happening. Mom had said she kicked him out. I decided to call Cindy on a whim. Hello? Hi, Cindy. It's Bob. Bob? Where are you? I'm in Dawson, Georgia. I'm calling to get an update on what's going on back home. I tried to call Mom, but my dad answered. Last I heard, she had kicked him out. She did. Your dad wanted to collect his things from the house and garage, so Mom gave him the weekend to do it. She's staying with your Aunt Mildred for now. How are things going for you? I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. Dave said he's going to fight it, but I told him to go ahead and waste his money. I told him he might delay it, but he couldn't stop it. Did you know he and your dad moved in with Sonia after your mom and I kicked them out? I didn't know, but I don't care either. They're all trash and deserve each other. Exactly. When are you coming back? I'm not. I don't think I'd like being in jail. Why do you say that? I'm sure it's illegal to shoot someone, even if it doesn't end them. Why do you think that? Because I did it to David. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Your dad and Dave told the police it was an accident. They said Dave accidentally shot himself while trying to show Sonia how to use the .380 llama you bought her for protection while you were away. How did they manage to get away with that? Your dad took the tool outside, fired into the ground, then brought it and the spent shell back inside and dropped them next to where Dave fell. And the police believed that. Yes, they did. What about the tires I damaged my dad's car? I don't think the police ever knew about that. Why would they do something like that? Your dad said the business couldn't handle the scandal. Dave wasn't happy about it and wanted to blame you, but your dad wouldn't let him. I'm still not coming back, at least not for a while. If I did, I'd probably run into my dad and David and I'd want to hurt them, badly. You still need to come back. Your mom needs you, Rob. She needs help with the business. She doesn't need me, she's got David. David is useless. Now that your dad isn't around to cover for him, it's clear he can't do anything. But I bet you already knew that. She was right. I knew David was useless, but he was family, and it was my dad's company. If my dad didn't care, why should I? I asked her, "How are you doing? Everything okay?" She answered, "That's a silly question. You know how I am. You're probably dealing with the same stuff I am." I said, "I'm sorry for dumping all this on you. I'm actually glad you did. We were talking about having a baby. If I had a child and then found out what Dave was doing, I'd end up as a single mother. You saved me from that." I told her I'd stay in touch, and after hanging up, I thought about what she said. It didn't match what I heard from my mom. Mom said Sonia was desperate to talk to me and nearly end her life. Cindy's version was different. How could she be desperate to reach me but still let those two losers move in with her? I shook my head. Unbelievable. The next morning, shouting outside woke me up. I saw a man shove a woman to the ground before speeding away. I went outside to help her, and she explained she had nowhere to go as they had already checked out and she only had $40 left. I offered her to wait in my room, but she said she was in big trouble with no way to get home to St. Paul, Minnesota. Realizing I could help, I told her I was heading to Minneapolis and offered her a ride. She was initially skeptical, questioning my intentions. I reassured her by suggesting she take down my driver's license and license plate information to give to someone for safety. She asked if I planned to make any moves on her, and I promised I wouldn't pursue her, but wouldn't resist if she made a move. She agreed, and we pinky swore on it. As we prepared to leave, she said her name was Mary. She was 31, married with no children, and worked as an office manager for a legal firm in St. Paul. "Was that your husband who left you?" "Yes, it was." "Before we head out, are you sure he won't come back for you?" "His last words to me were, 'Screw you, witch. Even if he did come back, I'm glad to be leaving.' One of the perks of working at the law firm is a discount on legal services. I'll be talking to them about a divorce as soon as I get back." I was curious, but I decided not to pry. I figured I'd learn all about it during the long drive. The map said it was about 2,000 miles. Then, of course, she wanted to hear my story, and I told her. Interestingly, her reaction was just like Sarah's. "Your father and your brother, and you didn't end them? I didn't think it was worth going to prison or getting the death penalty for." "That makes sense. You're going to divorce her, right?" "I haven't decided yet." "Are you seriously considering getting back with her?" "Oh no, definitely not. I can't decide between getting a divorce or just walking away. Eventually, she'll want a divorce, so I might as well let her deal with it. In the meantime, I won't be paying alimony or splitting anything with her." By then, we had finished eating. I paid the bill, and we hit the road. Once we were on the interstate, I asked if she was in a hurry to get home. "Why do you ask?" "It could affect how I drive. I usually drive about 700 miles a day. At an average speed of 70 miles per hour, that means about 10 hours of driving each day. Since it's almost 2,000 miles, it would take us about 3 days. If you need to be home sooner, I'll need to drive faster." She thought for a moment and said, 3 days works for me. 4 or 5 wouldn't be a problem either." Mary pulled out a book and started reading while I hummed along to the oldies on the radio, thinking about what I'd need to do when I finally went home. After 2 hours, she put her book down and started sharing her story. She explained that during a trip to Mexico, she got very drunk and saw her husband, Jake, having closeness with Nancy. Unsure if it was real or a drunken dream, she kept quiet until the morning they were leaving, when she confronted Jake. He got defensive, blaming her for his infidelity and implying Nancy wasn't the first. When she mentioned consulting a lawyer, Jake left her at the motel. We stopped for the night, and I asked if she wanted separate rooms. She said no, she trusted me. The room had twin beds. After her shower, I was already in bed and quickly fell asleep after saying goodnight. The next morning, we had breakfast and hit the road. During stops, we discussed our plans regarding our spouses. She was set on divorce. I was still unsure. That night, I got another room with twin beds. As before, I was in bed when she came out of the bathroom. She asked if she could sleep with me just to be held and cuddled. I hesitated, but agreed. She climbed in, and although she felt my hard tool, she didn't move away. I managed to stay disciplined. The next morning, she expressed surprise at my restraint, and I admitted I didn't think I could do it either. We arrived in St. Paul at 5:30 that afternoon. She directed me to a Best Western, explaining she wanted what she didn't get the night before. She was surprised I hadn't made a move when she got into bed without clothes, but now she was coming on to me, and I assured her I wouldn't run away. I still didn't understand why her husband cheated on her, but it certainly wasn't because she wasn't good in bed. When I asked if she wanted to go home, she said, "No, I'm going to sleep next to you tonight, and in the morning, I'm going to try for one more." She cuddled up to me, and we went to sleep. She reached for the door and said, "Come on in." "I don't think I should." "Why not?" "I'm not good with confrontations." "Confrontations? With your husband?" "Oh no, this is my sister's house. Jake won't be here. My sister can't stand him, and he knows it." I went inside with Mary and met her sister Julia, Julia's daughter, and her daughter's boyfriend. Mary recounted what happened in Mexico and San Diego, and Julia remarked on her dislike for Jake. When the conversation turned to me, Mary encouraged me to share my story. They were sympathetic, and Julia asked if I was heading back to Michigan. I said I hadn't decided yet. Julia mentioned her daughter Jess and her boyfriend Mike were going to the University of Michigan, and that I could save them airfare by giving them a ride. I decided to help and asked Jess when they planned to leave. Mary and I stayed for another hour, then left. In the car, Mary suggested I get a motel room and promised I wouldn't be alone. I checked into a nearby motel, got 2 keys, gave one to Mary, and then drove her home. Later that evening, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Julia. "Can I come in?" she asked. I let her in, and she said, "Mary told me everything about your trip, and I mean everything." I was curious about what she meant, and as I thought about it, she began to explain. "My husband died 9 months ago, and I've been really struggling because I need closeness badly. I've had to act like I'm still in mourning because people expect me to be sad for at least a year. But you're a stranger here, no one knows you, and you'll be gone the day after tomorrow. If Mary is right about you, I thought you might be able to help me out." She was at least 15 years older than me, but she was still attractive. Since I didn't owe Sonia any loyalty, I went for Julia. I pulled her close, kissed her, and we started taking off each other's clothes. About 20 minutes later, I heard someone unlock the door and Mary walked in. Julia said she'd leave enough for me, did she? "With a little help, I'm sure I can rise to the occasion." "Don't worry, Mary knows exactly what to do." And she did. "I need to start working on my divorce. If I join you in the shower, I might end up staying in this room all day." As she got dressed, she asked what my plans were for the day. I told her I'd probably stay in the room, relax, and read a book I had with me but hadn't started. She must have told Julia, because I was only partway through the first chapter when someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find a smiling Julia. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and she walked in, immediately starting to undress. "I know I'm taking advantage of you, but you'll be leaving tomorrow, so I need to make the most of it." Mary said she wouldn't mind if I joined in. "You don't mind, do you?" Looking at her attractive body, I realized I didn't mind at all. We had a great morning together, and around noon, she said she needed to leave. I promised Mary I wouldn't use it all up. Before she left, we made plans for me to pick up the kids the next day. As she kissed me goodbye, she said, "I wouldn't be upset if you decided to come back here to live. In a couple of months, I'll feel ready to start dating. Who knows? I haven't figured out what I'm doing with my life yet. I might come back." It was nearly 4 when Mary arrived, and she asked the same question as before. Did she leave enough for me? She had, but just barely. In the morning, after a wake-up that I would never forget, Mary gave me a hug and said, "I'm glad you're leaving today, but not in a bad way. After Jake is served, I need to stay completely above board so he can't use anything against me. If you were here, I'd be too tempted." She kissed me goodbye and left. I checked my watch and realized I had enough time to call home before picking up the kids at Julia's. "Good morning, and thank you for calling Dawson and Sons. How can I help you?" "Morning, Glenda. Is my mom around?" "Bobby? Even if she wasn't, I'm instructed to put you through to her immediately if you call. Please say you're coming home." "I might be, but it's not definite yet." "I'll get your mom." 2 rings later, Mom answered, "Bobby, where are you?" "St. Paul." "Where?" "St. Paul, Minnesota." "What are you doing there?" "Getting ready to head back home." "Thank goodness. I need you here to help me keep this place running." "I said I'm coming back, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'll be coming back to work." "Damn it, Robert. I need you here. How are you going to keep me and David apart? If I end up in the same room as him, I won't be able to stop myself from confronting him." "You don't have to worry about that. I caught him stealing from the company, and even though he's my son, I had to fire him." I didn't know how to respond, and there was a brief silence as I thought about what to say next. "That's true for me, too. I took $15,000 from the company before I left. I didn't see it as stealing, though. I saw it as severance pay that my father forced on me. How's that miserable piece of work anyway? Since you're talking to me on the phone, I assume you aren't in jail for ending him. I don't know where he is, and I don't care enough to find out. Sonia kicked him and your brother out. You knew they moved in with her, right?" Cindy told me about it when I spoke with her last. I don't know why she kicked them out, but honestly, I don't care. As for the money you took, we can sort that out later. For now, we're treating it as an advance on your wages. When you return, you might have to pay back some of it. I wasn't worried about that. Since I hadn't spent much of the money, I was still using what I took from our bank account before leaving. I told Mom I'd see her in a few days, then drove to Julia's to pick up my passengers for the trip to Ann Arbor. Julia greeted me warmly with a hug, then hugged and kissed Jessica, advising her to behave and get good grades. I helped carry Jessica's bags to the car and asked when Mike would arrive or if we were picking him up. Mike isn't coming. We broke up last night when I found out he was seeing Abby Fisk. I'm not usually insensitive, but considering my recent experiences, my first thought upon learning I'd be alone with this attractive 19-year-old was, great, another chance for me. But by the time we were on I-94, I had pushed that thought aside. As we drove down the highway, we chatted, and I learned she was going to the University of Michigan on scholarships, studying pre-law with plans to attend law school. I asked her to pick a radio station, but she preferred to read, so she took a book from her bag. I found a station playing country and bluegrass and hummed along with the music, even singing along with some songs. We had been driving for about 4 hours when she asked where we would stop for the night. There's no need to stop. It's only 600 miles. We should get there by around 8. But I want to stop. I don't need to check into the dorms until the day after tomorrow. Plus, you have to check in before 6, and you said we won't arrive until 8, so I'd need somewhere to stay overnight anyway. A few minutes later, she added, also, I want to see for myself. See what? I overheard Mom and Aunt Mary talking, and I want to find out if what they said is true. What did they say? That you're amazing in bed and really good at pleasing women. You can't be serious. I am. My only experiences were with guys my age who didn't really know what they were doing, and they didn't have the skills Mom and Aunt Mary talked about. Do you have any unusual interests? What? Ever fantasized about something wild like being with a mother and daughter or all the women in a family? Now it's just my mom, Aunt Mary, and me left. You seem to have an inky side, I observed. What makes you think that? Because you're interested in a man who's been with your mother and aunt. She smiled. You caught on. I'm not sure I can handle the pressure, I confessed. You seem to expect a superstar, and I'm not sure I meet that. My mom was raving about you to Aunt Mary, and that's good enough for me. Besides, with your experience, you have to be a whole lot better than the 3 I've been with. My first time was horrible. After the senior prom, which was a week after my 18th birthday, I let my prom date talk me into it. He climbed on, did it in about a minute and a half, and then got off me and said, wasn't it great? I hurt like heck and wanted to end him. You have to be better than that. I sure hope so. Once in the room, I undressed and then slowly undressed her. I pulled out and she turned around, fell onto the bed, looked up at me and said, thanks. I'm glad you convinced me to do that. Can we do it again? We could, and we did. We stayed in that room, only going out to eat until an hour before her dorm check-in deadline. I helped her carry her bags inside. She gave me her cell phone number, kissed me, and told me not to be a stranger. I'm going to need you. You've spoiled me. Boys my age will never measure up after you. After one last passionate kiss, I left the dorm feeling on top of the world, with "You've spoiled me" echoing in my head. Take that, Sonia. It was a short drive from Ann Arbor to Ypsilanti. I checked into a motel and set up a wake-up call for the morning. I stopped for breakfast and arrived at Dawson and Sons right when the doors opened at 8. I still had keys and could have let myself in, but it didn't feel right. I could have knocked until someone came, but honestly, I wasn't eager to face whatever awaited me. When George, the security guard, opened the door at 8, he greeted me with, "Welcome back." At the reception desk, Glenda jumped up, ran over, and hugged me. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Thank God you're back. Maybe now we can get things sorted out." Is Mom here? In her office. When I walked into Mom's office, she looked up and said, "It's about time you showed up. There's a huge stack of stuff on your desk that needs your attention right away. I haven't decided if I'm staying yet." "Nonsense! You need to be here. You can't solve your problems by running away. You're needed here, so this is where you should be. Now, get to work. We can talk at lunch." She was right, so I decided not to fight it. It wasn't actually a foot high, but it was a big stack, so I started working through it. Around 12:30, Mom came by and said it was time for lunch. We went to Pegasus, and after we'd ordered, Mom asked if I'd been home yet. I told her no. "I stayed at a motel last night." "Why didn't you just go home?" "Because Sonia is there." You're going to have to face her eventually, so why not do it now? Why are you so eager for me to deal with her? Given what she did with your husband, you should want her to suffer. But here you are worried about her hurting herself and pushing me to be involved with someone I'd like to strangle. It might not make sense to you, but I want my Robbie back, and that won't happen until you sort out this mess. To do that, you need answers to your questions to get closure. What questions? Like, why did she do it? What might I have done to cause it? How long did it go on? Were your father and brother the only ones? There might be more questions, but you need to resolve them to move on. I knew she was right, but even though I had questions, did I really want to know the answers? Was it because I wasn't satisfying Sonia in bed? My experiences with Maggie, Mary, Julia, and Jess made me think I was pretty good, but was I with Sonia? And why, of all people, my father and brother? I went back to work and made a lot of progress on the stack of papers. At 5:30, I left work and got into my car. As I approached the exit and stopped to check if it was clear, I asked myself, head to the motel or go home? I took a deep breath and turned left. Sonia's car was in the garage, so I knew she was home. I sat in my car, staring at the house, trying to gather the courage to go inside. Finally, I said to myself, just do it, Bob. And I got out and walked up to the front steps. As I reached for the door handle, the door swung open and Sonia was standing there. She immediately threw herself at me, crying, "You're okay." "Thank God you're okay," while hugging me tightly. I was so taken aback by her reaction that I just stood there for a moment, but then I shook it off and pushed her away. As I moved her aside, I walked past her into the house. She followed me, crying, "Why did you push me away? I love you." I turned to face her. "You love me, but you slept with my father and brother. I can't imagine what you'd do if you hated me. You don't understand. I had to do it." "You had to do it? I need to hear this. Go sit at the kitchen table while I pour myself a strong drink. I'll need it to handle whatever nonsense you're about to give me." With the Jack on the Rocks in hand, I joined her at the table. I sat down and said, "I didn't really want to be here, but Mom convinced me I had to face you." I took a sip of my drink and said, "Go ahead, Sonia, tell me. Do you remember Karen's birthday party? The one you missed because you were out of town?" "I remember. You told me to go even if you couldn't, so I went. Cindy was at her sick mother's, so Dave was there alone. When he saw I was by myself, he started following me around. He decided to be my watchdog for the night. He wasn't very good at it. Someone there, probably Dave, noticed I was alone and spiked one of my drinks with some kind of date ape pills. My watchdog didn't see what happened, but he noticed I was disoriented and figured something was wrong. Dave thought it was Kyle Barger because he saw Kyle hanging around me a lot. Dave got me out of there and took me home. I can't be sure if that's exactly how it went because by then, I was pretty out of it. I only know what Dave told me the next day. Once he got me home, he took off my clothes and put me to bed. Then he undressed and climbed in with me. He said he couldn't resist. He had always wanted me and saw a chance to do it without me knowing. I'd wake up the next morning with some idea that something had happened, but no clear memory of how or who did it. I later learned that date ape pills affect your body differently from your mind. Even if your brain is out of it, your body's senses are still active. As you come out of the pill's effects, you're already deep into the act and feeling everything intensely, just like you would with regular act. You know how I become completely uninhibited when I'm close to or reaching a peak. That's where I was when I started coming back to my senses. I was lying there, begging for more intensity and speed, not even realizing it was David. That's when your dad showed up. He was doing his usual check-in on me while you were away. He walked in, saw what was happening, and started taking pictures with his phone. I didn't even know he was there at the time. He took several pictures and got in bed with me. When Dave finished and got off, your dad took his place. After your dad finished, Dave was ready again and took over. It was during Dave's second turn that I started realizing who was with me, but by then, I was so out of it that it didn't matter who it was, as long as I was getting off. I don't know how many times they had closeness with me before they got dressed and left, but it left me exhausted and I fell asleep. That afternoon, Dave came over and begged me not to tell you or Cindy about what he had done. While he was there, your dad showed up and said he was back for more. When I told him to leave, he laughed and showed me the pictures he had taken. He said if I treated him well, you would never see those photos. I couldn't let you see them because they didn't show someone being forced. They showed a woman who looked like she loved closeness. I later realized I should have told both of them to leave and trusted you to believe me, but that's easy to say in hindsight. How many times did this happen? Every time you went on a trip. I stared at her for a few seconds before saying, "Karen's birthday party was 7 months ago, and I've been away on a dozen trips since then. I counted in my head and said, more than half a dozen. I've been away on 9 trips, including the one during Karen's birthday. She looked away, and suddenly I knew. I'm not sure how, but I knew. That's nonsense, Sonia. You kept doing it because you enjoyed it. You wouldn't let me do it because you thought it was disgusting, but you liked it and didn't want it to end. That's why you didn't come to me and tell me what happened, hoping I would believe you. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before and said, no, I didn't just like it. I loved it. I wanted even more than I was getting, but I couldn't risk it while you were around. I honestly thought if I only did it when you were away, you'd never find out. I enjoyed it a lot, but I love you and didn't want to lose you. Were David and my dad the only ones? No. Your dad brought 3 other guys with him 3 times. Wow, this just keeps getting worse. You were involved in group act. You slept with 9 different guys, and I bet you enjoyed that too. I did. And it wasn't 9 different guys. It was the same 3 each time. Do I know any of them? Are they people I see regularly who might be secretly laughing at me? No. I think they were just customers your dad was entertaining. I don't understand, Sonia. You say you love me, but you did this to me. For 7 months, my father and brother were laughing behind my back every time they saw me. They were making a fool of me, leaving me with the aftermath. I know all our customers. That means 3 men I work with are probably smirking inside while shaking my hand. You love me and you could still do this? You could have told me I wasn't satisfying you in bed, and I could have tried to improve. There's nothing wrong with you. You always make me feel good. It's about how often we can do it, not how well. You finish and need a break, but I can keep going for a long time. Think of it this way. Put 5 guys and 1 girl in one room, and 5 girls and 1 guy in another room. After 20 minutes, you'd find in the first room 1 guy having act, 1 guy waiting for his turn, and 3 others ready to go. In the second room, you'd see 5 women waiting for the guy to get hard again. It's just how we're made. There was no love or affection involved. I don't even like your dad and brother anymore. I think they're both jerks. They are jerks, but you let them live with you? They didn't have anywhere else to go, and I felt partly responsible for their situation. I could have ended it after the first time, but I didn't. I let it continue, and that's how we got caught. I told them there would be no this when they moved in. I didn't know if I could get you back, but I knew I definitely wouldn't have a chance if I kept going with them. One night, they tried to get me drunk so they could take advantage of me, but I figured out their plan and made them leave. It took me pointing a Colt at your dad to get them to go. You really thought I'd want to come back after seeing what was happening and knowing the truth? I still had hope. I know we see things differently, but aside from the shock of finding out, did it really hurt you? You got all the love and affection you wanted. I never said no to you, and most of the time, I was the one chasing you. That's not true. You've turned me down plenty of times. When did I do that? Every time I wanted to try from behind, you said no, but my father had no problem with it. I didn't give it to him. He and Dave took it that night when I was drugged, and I found out I actually liked it. You never got it because you never asked for it after I discovered I liked it. I thought about suggesting it, but I decided against it since I'd previously refused so often. I didn't want you to think I was just curious or suspicious. I figured I'd wait until you asked again, and then agree to try it, but you never asked. She paused for a moment and then said, since we're talking about it, maybe it could be a great welcome home gift? Maybe if I were coming home, but that's not likely. Her face fell as she asked, why not? Why would I stay with someone I know I can't satisfy? Why would I stay with someone who always wants or needs multiple partners? I never said that. You've always satisfied me, always. I don't need more than what you can give me. Yes, I discovered I liked more, but I don't need it. What I need is you. Even if you want to get back at me, go find someone else, but please come back to me. I thought about my travels and decided to stay quiet. I admit I was tempted by her offer, but I never acted on it. Just then, the front door slammed open, and my brother David limped into the room using a cane. He had a Colt in his other hand. I've been waiting for you to come back, you jerk. I'm going to take out both your knees and see how you like it. I'm your blood, for crying out loud. How could you do this to me? What? Did you think you'd get a medal for sleeping with my wife? I should have just ended you. Forget you, he said, aiming the tool at my knees. No! Sonia screamed, throwing herself between me and David just as he fired. I'm not sure who was more shocked, David or me, but I reacted first. I tackled him, he dropped the tool, and I hit him 3 times in the face, knocking him to the floor. I grabbed the Colt and hit him in the head with it, then turned to Sonia, who was on the floor bleeding. I called emergency and ran to the kitchen for a towel. I knelt beside her, trying to stop the bleeding. She looked up at me and whispered, "Don't leave me, don't leave me. Please don't leave me." The EMTs and police arrived, and they called for another ambulance for David. I guess I'd been a bit too rough. David kept waking up while I was trying to help Sonia, so I had to hit him again with the tool to keep him down. I think I hit him 6 times. It was a close call. A wife bleeding on the floor, a messed up brother, and me standing there unharmed. I spent an hour talking to the police, but they accepted my version of events. It helped that I had recorded everything on my phone as I approached the front steps. They had just left when I got the call. Sonia had died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I was devastated. Sonia's actions showed me how much she really cared for me. If she had survived, I probably, no, almost certainly would have given our marriage another chance. The whole incident made the news, and about a week later, I came home from work to find Jess waiting for me on the front porch steps. She stood up and greeted me with a hug. "How are you holding up?" "Just barely. What brings you here?" I saw what Mom went through after losing Dad. She needed something to hold on to. I thought you might need someone now, too. We had something really special, so I thought I could step in and help. It lasted 5 months before she told me it was over. She had met someone new, felt a strong connection, and decided she had to move on. David's trial didn't start until nearly 8 months later. He tried to argue it was an accident and he never meant to hurt anyone, but no one bought it, and he was sentenced to 20 years to life. On the day he was sentenced, Cindy called me and asked for a favor. She wanted me to sleep with her so she could tell David. Cindy was attractive, and I saw no reason not to help her. She wore me out, and the next day she went to see David during visiting hours and told him what she had done. She didn't get the reaction she expected. Instead of getting angry and shouting at her, he just sat there and cried. A week later, she came to see me again. "I could use a friend with benefits. Do you know anyone who might be interested?" We were involved for another 4 months, but then she got a promotion at work and moved to Dallas. I was really sorry to see her go. I thought about going with her, but she talked me out of it. "I like you, Rob. I like you a lot, but I don't love you. I need to find someone I love and who loves me. I'm starting a new life in Dallas and hope to find what I need there." My father tried several times to reach out, but I refused to talk to him. When he died of a stroke, I went to his funeral and made a scene. In front of about 15 people, I urinated into his grave as they lowered the coffin. Talking to my mom, I found out the names of 3 customers who were very close to my father. They might not have been the same ones he took to see Sonia, and I might never be sure. But I decided they were the ones and made them pay in my own way. I didn't hurt them physically, but I messed with them. They were still customers, so I targeted them through the business. They ended up paying 2 to 4 cents more per unit than other customers, and they never got the same quantity discounts. It wasn't much of a revenge, but mentally, I needed to do something. I know it was unfair to target them without being absolutely sure they were involved. It might have just been my imagination, but sometimes I thought I saw a smirk on their faces. Still, I'm human, and like most people, I felt a strong urge to get even. Even if I was wrong, my mental state was better for having done something rather than nothing. Let karma handle the rest. There was one unexpected outcome from all this. 10 months after returning home, I was sitting at home reading the financial section of the New York Times when my cell phone rang. "Hello? Rob, it's Maggie. Do you remember me?" "I do." "My sister saved your number from when I used your phone to call her." "I remember. Well, my sister insisted that I call you. Believe me, I didn't really want to. But she thinks you have a right to know." "Know what?" "You're a father. You have twin sons." "Are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious. You're the only man I've ever been with." There was a brief pause, and then she said, "I'm not asking for anything. I only called because Chris insisted it was the right thing to do." 36 hours later, I was knocking on the door of a house in Houston, ready to start a new chapter in my life.